All right, there's this one question in India right now that is splitting the entire country. Should we count people by caste? Today, we're going to break down the call for a nationwide caste census, and it's a huge debate about fairness, power, and a social system that's been around for thousands of years.
To really get why this is such an explosive issue, let's start with just one number, 73%. Now, this isn't just some random statistic. It represents the vast majority of people in India.
So, what is this 73%? Well, it's the combined share of groups that have historically been on the margins. We're talking about the other backward classes, scheduled castes, and scheduled tribes. But here's the kicker, and this quote really nails it. Even though they make up nearly 3/4 of the population, they own, get this, none of the top 200 companies in India. I mean, just think about that for a second. That huge gap between population size and economic power, that's the engine driving this entire national conversation. It forces you to ask some really fundamental questions about fairness in the world's largest democracy. So, you might be wondering, what did India do to try and fix this? This isn't exactly a new problem. Well, the answer is one of the world's most ambitious affirmative action policies. In India, it's known as reservations, a system designed to try and level a playing field that's been anything but level for a very, very long time. So let's dig into how this whole policy even came to be. It definitely wasn't a simple fix. It was born out of decades of struggle and, well, a lot of debate. The road to the current system was a long one, marked by these key moments. It all started with data from way back in 1931. That old data was used to inform a major commission, almost 50 years later, which then led to policies that were fiercely debated before finally getting the green light from the Supreme Court. A long road, for sure. One of the most important outcomes of this process was the official creation of this new category, the OBCs, which stands for Other Backward Classes. The Mandel Commission was basically tasked with identifying these specific communities, the ones who were clearly at a disadvantage but didn't fit into the other reserved category. And what did the commission find? Well, using that old data from the 1931 census, because that's all they had to work with, they came up with a staggering estimate. They figured that OBCs made up 52% of India's population, more than half the country.
Okay, but here's where it gets a little tricky. You'd think 52% of the population means a 52% reservation, right? Well, no. The Supreme Court had already put a cap on all reservations. They couldn't go over 50% in total. So, to stay under that legal ceiling, the Commission recommended a 27% quota for OBCs in government jobs and education.
But here's the problem, and it's a huge one. That entire solution, that critical 27% figure, is based on data that's now almost a century old. And that brings us right to the heart of the intense debate that's happening in India today. So let's break down the two sides of this argument. And, it's not a simple case of yes or no. Both sides have really strong, deeply held beliefs about what's best for the country. On one side, you've got people saying, look, you can't fix what you can't measure. They believe that having accurate, up-to-date data is absolutely essential for social justice and to see if these affirmative action policies are even working. But on the other side, there's a real fear that counting people by caste will just make those social divisions even deeper. They worry it could become a tool for political gamesmanship and undermine the ultimate goal of a casteless society. So that brings up the big question, right? After more than 70 years of this reservation system, how much has representation actually changed? Has the policy really worked? Well, if we actually dive into the data, especially on government jobs, a really clear pattern starts to show up. And it seems that while affirmative action has definitely opened doors, it hasn't necessarily opened them all the way to the top. Just take a look at these numbers for the scheduled castes. In the lower-level jobs, their representation is almost 18%, which is actually above their 15% quota. That's great. But then you look at the Group A jobs, the top-tier decision-making roles, and it drops to just over 13%, falling short of the target. So what this really points to is a persistent glass ceiling. The system has been successful in helping marginalized communities get in the door, but it hasn't been nearly as successful in promoting them to the highest levels of power. And all of this brings us back to the central metaphor that supporters of the census keep using to make their case.
They see it as a diagnostic tool. Just like a doctor needs an X-ray to see a broken bone before they can fix it, they argue India needs a caste census to see the deep-seated fractures in its society. Without it, you're just guessing at the diagnosis.
But here's the thing. After you take the X-ray and the diagnosis is crystal clear, the most difficult part is still ahead. What's the cure? And this is the immense challenge a new census would create. Collecting the data is one thing. Deciding what to do with it would be even harder, and politically, it would be absolutely explosive.
And that leaves us with the central paradox of this whole debate. To create a society where caste doesn't matter, do you first have to count it, measure it, and build policy all around it? Or does the very act of counting risk making those dividing lines permanent? That is the incredibly tough question India is grappling with today.